Today's episode is to business owners, those who have ever considered or thought about or heard about the idea of hiring their own children and what benefit that might have. And there's a lot of details to this topic. It's one of the benefits that you have as a business owner. So let's go ahead and dive into the topic. Who wants to get us started?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have heard about this. They've heard, "Hey, I could pay my kids," and it feels like a gray area. It feels like something on the edge. Should I be doing that? Is that skirting the rules? And I think the reason they feel that they've heard that is because people have abused this. People have said, "Yeah, my 12-year-old files papers, and I pay them $80,000 a year," and
Yeah,
there's no way that
they are
that's
great
reasonable.
tax filers.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. There's no way that that's reasonable. The IRS is going to be okay with that. Like that's a problem. That's abusing this thing. But what we want to talk about is where is it possible to hire your children to do things? The business gets a write-off, right, for the employment compensation. The child with earning income, they get the standard deduction. And so if they earn a certain amount, the standard deduction is going to cover that. And then the third piece being, it has to be real work. It has to be real things they're doing for you. And it used to be kids could file, right? That was kind of all there was. But now you think about marketing, are your children part of a billboard or a marketing campaign? Are they helping with some of your social media, depending on their age? Like, there's
There
a
are a
lot of
lot of different options. Yeah.
kids to be employed doing real meaningful work, and for parents to potentially compensate them for that. Randy, I think in years past, you've had some of this. I'm sure you've had these conversations. You've probably done some yourself.
You're going to create a hornet's nest here because my children are going to listen to this and go, wait a minute, what was my compensation?
Truly, I was a filer or would go back, and I recall that was one of my very first jobs. I would come into the office and you would pay me for an hour, 2 hours, however long I worked, and I would take account statements and go in the back and open the files. And, I knew my alphabet, but there was real work, right? And I had to really track my time to do it. So, anyways, let's talk about some of the benefits here. You obviously want to track, just like we were talking about, not just time, but the activity that they do. And you might frankly have some children that are better suited for the type of work that you need within your company. And so this may not apply all the way across the board. But for the most part, there's something that you can find that they could do that would be helpful. This seems like kind of a simple strategy, but
It can be really complex. And again, I appreciate what Jeremiah said is that it's not, you got to be careful about how you do this, but you do want to include your children to help them not only, first of all, learn good work ethic, but also to get compensated for it, right?
Yeah.
yeah. It appears, or people have talked about it as like a loophole, but there is actually a legitimate way to do this. But the baseline, recommendation here is make sure you check all these ideas with your CPA and your tax professional. So go
Yeah.
from there.
I think, Randy, a great comment of, we're not just up to saving money. You're also up to teaching your children the value of money, hard work, all of those things. And so I think and even like for Laura and I, for all of us, we own a business, we run a business, we want our children to be interested in the outcomes of the business, to one, see as a family how it benefits us, but also to be cheerleaders, to say, hey, mom and dad are going to go do this thing. And they're like, yeah, mom and dad, go do it. That's going to benefit the business, which is good for everybody. We want them to have a perspective and a visibility on what we're doing so they can be part of it. And some of that is, getting in there, rolling up their sleeves, learning how to work hard and get a reward for that. So I think in the midst of it being a good tax strategy, it's also I think potentially a good parenting strategy of how to include your kids.
And teach them hard work. And I think most businesses, especially as they grow, they have opportunities that are multifaceted. So even if you have a child that's not interested in the exact type of work that you do, maybe they have an interest in marketing. Maybe they have an interest in a skilled type of labor. Maybe they have an interest in accounting or finance, right? Like, how could that be helpful? So it
Right.
takes a little bit of creativity, but we've seen a variety of different kind of tasks, unpacking shipments, right? Organizing inventory, those types of things, basic administrative tasks, apart from just social media. And obviously as they get older, the types of tasks they can do can become more complicated. But I love that place to start, which is not just the overall financial benefit of this structure, but the financial principles and the work ethic that you could start instilling in your children at an early age.
Yep. Why don't I walk through some of the basic logistics? The big caveat, of course, is there's complex rules here. You need to work with your CPA. You need to review what's appropriate. But the general structure is you would be a partnership or a sole proprietor. Corporations have some different rules, but You'd be some sort of pass-through partnership type entity. You're the parents who own the business. You then hire your own kids to come work, and you put them on payroll, and you start structuring this as going through. Different S corps, different corps can do different things, but the one we're talking about is kind of the partnership structure because it's the most powerful. And so they do real work. You got to document it. You got to, the hours, the pay rate, all that stuff. You make it very reasonable and fair, but you pay them. And the benefits, we'll start listing them out a little bit. First is the company gets a write off for payroll deduction. The second, and we mentioned before, is that the individual child, when they receive that income, they're probably below the standard deduction, depending how much you pay them. And so they're not going to have to pay taxes on a federal sense, potentially on a state sense, because of that standard deduction. The third thing, if you're these partnership type structures, is those Medicare, FICA type taxes. You can avoid those if it's your own child working in your own business. It's another benefit just added on. The next is that money might go to the kids, right? Maybe it goes to the kids' bank account. Maybe they use that to buy things. What's most common is the parents then utilize those funds to pay for sports, to pay for things that the
Mhm.
kids are already in that benefit those kids because they're the kids' money, but they're able to utilize that in a tax advantaged way. And then the
Yeah.
fifth, I'll say the last one. Okay, go ahead. That's my favorite, but you could go.
No, go ahead. I think I'm trying to read your mind. I think it's my favorite option.
So the last version is rather than use the money for sports, rather than give it to the kids, because that child has earned income, they're able to take those funds and put them into a Roth IRA.
Yes, that's
And
exactly what I was gonna say.
And because they were in such a low tax bracket, they don't need a tax deduction. So you don't need a regular IRA or a regular 401k. They can go straight to the Roth IRA or the Roth. And Laura, why would a kid at 5 years old want to have a
Want
Roth
to
IRA?
contribute to I know, I hope all of our listeners are having the same ideas I'm having, like, I've got some ideas for my 7-year-old. He can take out the trash and organize the snack drawer and help with social media. No, not quite yet. Anyways, okay, so if you can contribute to a Roth IRA in this circumstance, if you have earned income. So in this case scenario, if your child has earned income because they're on payroll, there would be an option to contribute up to the maximum annual amount into a Roth IRA. And so you would just open up that account in their name. And let's say, just for talking purposes and illustrative purposes, if they contributed $6,000 annually to the Roth IRA, so just pause on that. It could be that they're paid, let's say, $12,000 on payroll for the year. 5,000 is used for things like sports and kids activities, things that you would already be paying for, but now it comes to the kid. They can pay for their own purposes. Then they take a portion of it and put it into a Roth IRA account and let that invest over the long term at a moment in life where it's not very painful for your 15-year-old to start to take $6,000 and put into a Roth IRA. Not only what are you teaching them in terms of the principle of investment and paying your future self as much as you're utilizing the funds now. I mean, we have several clients that are talking about how do I help my child fund, make the down payment for their first home, right? If you can start them early on, they might have Roth funds that can be beneficial for things like that.
Again, I think the child, obviously, you have to instruct the child what this is going to do for them. You have to kind of paint the picture what their life will look like if they continue on this strategy. But I could see a lot of parents where they'd explain this to their child, and the child says, "Why am I doing this? What advantage am I getting out of this now?" And so you have to be able to paint a picture so that creates the incentive to keep doing it. And if you have the right picture going forward, a child can latch onto that and they can develop and grow into that mindset, right?
Mhm.
Well, and let me just tell some stories. We have some clients that their kids work in the business, and the kids have no idea they're being paid. They have no idea that that money is building their future. All they know is that mom and dad take them to the office, and they have to work, and mom and dad make them do real work. And so they're just part of the family business. There's some that have no idea about this. There's and a story. We have one client that their parents had been, wasn't quite this structure, but they've been putting money away for their child for many, many years. And it wasn't until I forgot what age he was. It was well past 18. I think it was maybe 22, where the parents said, "Oh, by the way, you may not have realized, but
Nice.
we have this account for you, and the reason you get this weird 1099 that you never knew about before, like these tax things, is because you have this big amount of money." And it was a great reveal. It was a great moment for them, and that kid was able to use those funds to move on to some great things. But yeah, I think there's some kids who, as you said, Randy, at 7 years old, they may have just taken out the trash and they don't even know that they have an account. But by 15, by 17, by 18, I sure hope that they understand, hey, this is what this money's doing. And you're teaching some financial principles beyond just this is how you do a budget, this is how you write a check, which I guess people don't really write checks anymore. Besides just teaching some basics, it's in my mind a couple layers up of saying we're putting this money for your future.
Yeah. There's a lot you can do with it. I mean, I think the value of understanding, the value of a dollar, so to speak, to utilize that cliche, but like how hard do I have to work to earn $15, and what am I going to spend that $15 on? Okay, now all of a sudden, the next time I think about spending $15, right? Basic principles that I think are still helpful for them to understand that they're getting paid. There is that alternative method, which is to make it kind of a surprise. So there's a lot that you can do with it, but the actual structure can have a tax benefit for the parents too. Maybe you're investing in your kids' sports activities, and those expenses are tremendous. Depending on how many kids you have and what they're involved in, it's like another mortgage payment on a monthly basis. So if you can take some of that expense that you would have already been spending and through payroll give the value and now a tax-free rate and tax deductible to you as a business expense, and it comes to your kid tax free potentially, and they can spend out of their own account. But the work, guys, the work has to be real. It has to be legitimate work, and you have to make sure that you're
Okay,
talking to your CPA
so
about
let me
this.
ask a question. I'm a father, and I want to compensate my children for doing work, but I don't have a business. I can't do this, can I?
When you say you don't have a business, that would be my first question.
I
You
work
know,
I work I
can
work
this
for somebody. I
become
get a W-2.
Yeah. The question I have is could you make something a business, right? Can there be a side hustle? Can there be something that you have your kids being a part of? I don't know very many adults who are, firing up the lemonade stand. But to say, is there a side hustle you want to create to potentially take advantage of this? To answer your question directly, if you just have W-2 income, you can't just port that over to your kid and say, hey, oh, you have
Yeah,
10,000 of this. That was my kid's work. That
yeah,
doesn't work.
yeah.
So generally, this is something that we look at for business owners, and there's some differences. If you are a part of an S corp or a C corp or an LLC as opposed to a sole proprietorship, it's not that you can't do. It's just the rules are a little different, and you have to know what your through line is, how this is going to work for you.
We just wanna make sure that people are listening to this, they all of a sudden they're going, "Oh, I can just do this." Going, "No, there gotta be a structure to it so that you can, stand a test of an audit or a test of the expense." I mean, there's a real legitimate structure that you've gotta have a basis to, right?
Right. You can't pay your 12-year-old $80,000 to organize folders. Like, it's not going to fly. Like, we are, not going to make that recommendation. So, you got to maintain time records, document the actual tasks performed, and issue proper payroll documentation, right? You got to make sure you have the right accounting in place so that you're not at risk of an audit. But if structured correctly, the actual arrangement is entirely legitimate.
Well, and Laura and I have 4 kids, so we are just ready to put them to work. Get get this
They
going. We
don't
have a
even know
small
what's coming their way.
That's right. A small army running this business will be great. So it's really
I
good.
love it.
Well,
I
I think
love
as,
it.
as we as we think through, what business owners can do, I think there's a good moment of pivoting a little bit. Of it's not just about making money. It's not just about the tax strategies. That's where we spend a lot of our time. But as you said, Randy, to reiterate, I think there's a good moment to bring in and teach, financial literacy to your family. We're talking initially smaller kids, but I think there's a level of, someone who's 16, 17, 18. What does their first job look like? And for some people, they say, hey, go out and get a job. You need to learn how to work. And I think for a lot of our business owners, they know how to work hard, right? They know how to dig in and make things happen. And they want their children to have that grit also. And maybe their employers are teaching them that, maybe not. And so if you were to bring them into your business, get them doing real work with the managers that will push them, will teach them, will help them become great workers with grit. I think some of the biggest concerns we have with successful business owners and clients at our client level is that their kids didn't have the same upbringing they did. Maybe don't have the same grit. Maybe don't have the same ability to, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, right?
You
Type of a
haven't
thing.
faced the same challenges, yeah.
Yeah. And so to be able to almost curate some of this, not in a mean sense, but I think, a very loving sense. How do we teach our kids what it's like to work hard? And if you own a business, right, and you have a kid who's 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there, thinking about where could I help them earn some grit, learn how to work hard, see some rewards, and really help their future. I think it's a great
And
perspective shift.
recognize opportunity. I mean, I'm going to tell another client story as I like to do, but we have a client who immigrated and he remembers at the age of 11 walking across the US border with nothing but the clothes on his back. And his parents, who did not have a career here, nor could they bring anything with them, and had 5 children to raise in America. Now, fast forward, all 5 of their children are extremely educated, professional, high net worth individuals because they saw opportunity. But he was also at an age where he saw that they had nothing and their parents would do anything to go out and get a job to be able to put food on the table and provide for their family. And, if we're raising our kids in America, there is opportunity, but how do they perceive that? Do they see it as just something owed to them, something that they don't have to work hard for? Or is it a platform by which they can rise to whatever level of achievement or accomplishment, right, et cetera, that they desire to do so? So there's a true benefit in kind of teaching them that work ethic at a young age. And arguably, we have friends that have been business owners for it, or it could be a family business for generations, and they encourage their kids, even if they've worked in the company at a young age, to go and work for a different employer because they're going to have a different experience management style. They're going to take something different from that experience before they come back and start a career within the family business, so that they have developed some grit and that they understand that it's not just being given to them. So there's lots of different strategies at play within this as
You're
well.
not just walking into wealth. You understand how that wealth was created and the work and the effort and the decision process all along the way, and to give that benefit, so to speak, to the next generation. That's why a lot of businesses fail after the second generations, because they don't teach that work ethic going forward into that business development. And it reduces their impact on the business. The decisions they have to make it's like, why am I here? And they
Mhm.
go, let's just sell it and I'll go on and do my own thing. So I think that's a big reason why a lot of businesses don't succeed past the third generation. So anyway.
Yep. A lot of hard work. Well, I hope to our listeners this has been helpful. There are some more details, and if you need those details, certainly, ask your CPA or talk to your financial professional. But this is one of the ways that you can legitimately hire your children, as you've heard, if you're a business owner.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricordatvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricordatvisors.com, or simply click on the link in the show notes.
We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.